Good morning to you all. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning, and welcome to this new session of the European Film Forum here in Berlin. It's great to be here during the 67th edition of the Berlinale. I'm Marjorie Paillon. I'm a journalist, and I'm thrilled to spend this morning with you again. And of course, we're going to worm our way into innovation and what it means to the content industry we're all part of. So, in the upcoming minutes, we'll welcome on this stage great speakers and experts who will focus on trends and how disruptors are crucial to the understanding of this ecosystem and of where it goes. We will tackle data, of course, and we'll have two panels to do so. The first one will broaden our perspective into this 21st century new oil and how data actually fuels the engine of content creation. The second panel will be more focused on algorithm and how those tools actually, again, are helping us to innovate and bring together a brand new strategy when it comes to content creation. But the question here is, should we trust algorithm? It's going to be the battleground, and we'll discuss it in a second. And of course, you'll have your word to say. So if you are willing to have a reaction or question, just remind that you'll be totally allowed to do it after the panel segment. We'll have about 15 minutes Q&A together. And we can, of course, you can join the conversation anytime on Twitter with the hashtag European Film Forum. But first, to introduce this edition of the European Film Forum, please join me in welcoming Roberto Viola, Director General of DG Connect for the European Commission.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So it's a great pleasure to open this event, which for us, it's very important because it's the first time we discuss here about data. But it's not the first time we discuss about data in general with all our stakeholders. And you might wonder what a medical doctor, engineer, content creator, they will have in common. Well, I think they will have in common that they will use more and more data and data-related technologies. That's really what is changing our society. Some say data is the oil of our modern society, others are a bit more skeptical. But when you think, for instance, what data means in medical science, how many things can be discovered, can be prevented, can be done with a really much more efficient means and lesser cost. So, for instance, in medical science, data is changing everything. I don't need to tell you what it means in the automotive industry. The new connected and automated driving systems will use data to make sure that you can be driven safely and when you like. I mean, you can drive your car, but in foggy highways, you will rely on automated driving driven by data. And I can go on and on with examples in the industrial field, in finance, because of course artificial intelligence is entering finance. In all these areas, my Directorate General is investing, and we actually have a full directorate, which is a data directorate. We have formed working groups in fintech. We have formed working group in health. We have activities going on in Industry 4.0. We have activities going on when it comes to automated driving. And now, today, we start with media, because, of course, media, since the start, has been generating data. I mean, when you think about music, when you think about images, of course, these are a set of well-organized and connected data. So, of course, the media industry, it's already at use with data, especially since the inception of digitization in the industry, and more now will look at data and the possibilities that the so-called big data, are giving to operators working in the sector, creators, and distributors, and whoever, is part of the value chain. Data and the use of big data is not in contradiction with creativity. I think from the start of the history of cinema, from the start of the history of music, creators have always used the best available technology and made the best out of it. Think about, moving to Technicolor, moving to high definition, super high definition, to whatever technology you think, 3D, and in the future, virtual reality. So expression, creativity, invention is not in contradiction with technology. That we know. And when it comes to data, what it unlocks is the possibility to understand much better and in a much more precise way, what is going on in the target, that is, of course, the target for whoever is in the media production, the people. So having a better idea using big data algorithms on what the people like, how the people react, how the people feel. So, of course, the first application that we see in the media sector is understanding better what is going to be the likely reaction of people when confronted with a new production. Now, already VOD distribution platforms have their own algorithm, and they use their own data to do that and to make a sort of pre-screening of the success. And I think one of the things we need to debate today is how widespread this system should be, how open the system should be. We have just published what we call in our jargon a policy communication, where the European Commission sets out policy orientations, and we have done it for data. And one of the things we started to ask ourselves and ask everyone, and there's a public consultation going on, is who owns the data? First question. Who can use the data? Maybe even more important, who has the right to use the data? How data can be exchanged in an interoperable fashion? How data can be ported from one application to another? Who's liable if something goes wrong? Now, if I take these big questions in the media sector, then one of the things to ask is, when you look at the value chain, there are actors that own certain type of data or know certain type of data. So which amount of cooperation, normally, it should be a voluntary cooperation, should take place in order for everyone to share the data, in order for everyone to make sure, for instance, when it comes to understanding the likelihood of what is going to be the success, in inverted comma, of a new release, how to share those data, how to understand a little bit better how those data are created. And also, feedback from people. When a new release is out, it's also very important. And of course, you can do it as we do it, as many do of you in this room, in a sort of empirical fashion. And more with text and data mining, you can do a very, very thorough search on everything which is around social media, which is around the web, which is around the user feedback. And more with the various apps, with the possibility to consume audiovisual products everywhere, you get a wealth of information about the user feedback. Now, I think one of the issues which I expect you discuss today is how those data are shared, how those data are utilized, and what kind of transparency there is throughout the value chain in terms of utilization of those data. Of course, the issue is not new. Audience metering, user feedback is an art which has been around for a couple of decades, even more. But now, with the systematic use of big data, things become much more interesting in a way, but much more complicated in another way. Another element which is intriguing in the use of data in the media sector is a little bit the anticipation factor in terms of predicting, understanding what is the feeling of the users. Now, take something completely different. Take epidemic. We know now that by using big data, for instance, in terms of Google search or searching in any other search engine, other data about how people move, in the future data about our smartwatches, we can understand how, for instance, a flu epidemic spreads around, and that's very good. And so we are studying with the experts more and more how to use big data in terms to understand how the average health of a population is going and what are the big trends or the micro trends when it comes to a certain area. The same applies, of course, and you are well aware of it, about traffic. Now, what is changing with the introduction of artificial intelligence and the first commercial products you see in finance is that through artificial intelligence, this kind of data can also be predictive. I mean, they can start to anticipate what is going to be a likely future. Now, what the media sector can do with this kind of tools. This is the other big issue that you will be debating today. And again, is this in contradiction with creativity? Which, I mean, we should not forget that technology helps, but I mean, cinema, music, and whatever is creativity is an art. And no one, of course, can constrain the creativity of a set of authors, creators, and we must respect it. But at the same time, if they have new tools, why not using them? So why not testing and anticipating before actually entering into production what could be, I mean, the expected output of certain choices? Because, of course, screen writers have many possibilities when it comes to a script. Maybe they want to test them out, especially for commercial media. This is not something that goes against the spirit of it. So the use of artificial intelligence and big data is a nice support tool, as much as it is electronic editing or whatever other system you currently use. The point is to understand what are the limits. The point is to understand who owns, so to say, the truth, in inverted comma. Because, of course, in a society like ours, which is bombarded by many, many things, one of the issues is how to trust and what to trust. So this is another thing I expect you discuss today. So to conclude, this day is a little bit of an experiment for us, and we will see what and hear what is going to be the feedback, your feedback to this discussion about big data applied to media production. But we are convinced that this is an important trend, and this is a trend that we need to watch, we need to understand, and with the right, safeguards also to support. Thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy the workshop.
And thank you so much to you, Roberto Viola. And of course, we will better test data this morning all together and try to see how to benefit from it and how to make the most of it when it comes to content creation, when it comes to engaging audiences, when it comes to marketing maybe too. But first, we're going to get an impulse on what digital transition really means to this industry. Some might play the Cassandras and being risk adverse, but we are going to try to be a little bit more risk happier here this morning. And of course, it's going to be the case of our next speaker. He founded Kreait, his digital agency 6 years ago to focus on creating meaningful, user-centric, and relevant digital services. But why and how should we be a little more consumer-centric or audiences-centric, if you may? Why is user experience crucial to audiovisual content and services? And how should data would be used in that respect? Well, I guess that Dirk Hofmann has the answers.
Good morning, everybody, also from my side. Maybe to just set a bit the scene, so one question to the audience, and please raise your hand. Who sees data or AI as an opportunity? All right. And who sees it as a challenge or a threat? Okay, thank you. So around 50-50, so I will try to either convince you on one or the other side. Let's see that. Big data, I think the first thing is it's one of these hype words at the moment. So you will find thousands of explanations, some of them with hope, some are more technically related, some of them are, you could say trying to solve issues or supposed to try to solve issues which you haven't been able to solve otherwise. But at the end, you will also find people saying that, yeah, data has been big for many, many years since the beginning. But I think what is maybe the most important thing is to kind of remember 4 V's when you talk about big data. One is the volume, the scale, and I think you see here a couple of numbers. I actually don't want to go too deep into the numbers, but it's massive amount of data generated every day. The analysis, of course, the velocity is one of the things. Sensors, a car nowadays is not working without sensors, and the analysis of this information. The variety, which is, I think, one of the new things, is you see more data combined from different angles. You have now wearables which are providing information. You have sensors in all kind of machineries helping to understand and even identify events you otherwise would not identify. But there's also the uncertainty of data, and actually looking into a lot of the project, and maybe this is also something you are questioning, is that can I trust this information? Can I trust this data, what has been gathered? Does it really reflect what it should reflect? The other buzzword, obviously, is currently artificial intelligence. For many people, I think it's now, you could even say big data is already outdated. Now everybody talks about AI. But I think the important thing is to understand that these both buzzwords are heavily interconnected. As you can see, machine learning, deep learning, if you talk to a data scientist, he will say, yeah, I'm working on machine learning for many years, but now I call it artificial intelligence. So the technology, a lot of these technologies have been there for quite a while, but the combination with big data, with the amount of data, what you have just seen kind of with the slide before, brings it to a new dimension. New technologies also give it, or provide the chance to give it access to much more people than otherwise would have been able to use this information. So I think a lot of expectation on big data, a lot of the big expectation on artificial intelligence. But what is really happening, or what is really kind of the impact of it? I think you can identify 6 disruptive models where this will have kind of massive implications for industries. I think some of the industries are already heavily impacted at. You see different industries go through different kind of maturity level. I will briefly talk about the music industry a bit later, where you see they went through that journey for quite a while. But I think if you go through some of the things here is radical personalization. That's something you will see later as in a couple of examples. Really kind of a user thing, provides new product and services which haven't been or wouldn't be possible without that. Orthogonal data sets. I think this is also something we see every day at the moment, is that combining data from different industry, from different kind of perspectives, allow new ways of providing services, provide new insights. And the discovery of this information data provides new sources of innovation. To make that happen, you need to undergo a massive kind of exercise of doing this data integration. So a lot of companies are actually spend a lot of time, and also I think on the governmental side, you see open data initiatives all over, making this data accessible, integratable in the services. And then I think hyperscale real-time matchmaking of demand and supply, for example. You might have kind of used Uber to come here. Those services or car sharing wouldn't be possible without kind of the data, without kind of the availability of calculation of demand and supply on real time. So this is a very generic kind of picture. This actually is impacting different industries in different ways, and of course each of these elements might have a different impact there. But let's go into what does it mean for the movie industry. And I've split it into 3 elements. So what's the impact on the creativity side in terms of creating content, second on the marketing side, and then on the third one, how the user will experience that. If you think about how analytics can impact the movie making, some of the examples you might have heard already in the speech before, it goes across all elements: story evaluation, theme testing, title testing. You can also figuring out, of course, if it makes sense to kind of get kind of a follow-up afterwards, concept evaluation. Of course, you might say, but that will kill creativity. I would say I think it's an opportunity to kind of challenge creativity. You can it can assist your decision making in every aspect. Of course, and here these are example data of legendary pictures. This is, for example, what they use in their daily work. They have the content side, they have the people side, kind of their user base. They have the social side, where they look into sentiments, as well as kind of tweets and so on. So as such, also the sky is the limit in terms of what data do you use, and there's a lot of exploration. There's also at this moment a lot of creativity about what data actually can provide a lot of meaningful information for your work. So there's experience with can you kind of capture emotion by using variables, using the sensors, which kind of, for example, measuring pulse. Does it have any implication? But also going into the content side, it provides new kind of use. What you see here is, you could say, the Uber framework of a graph done by Marvell. It's very hard to read, but there's actually names here. It's the kind of, they did an analysis of all their characters of the universe. And if you go back kind of further, you see how the different kind of Captain America relates to Avengers and so forth. So they created an ontology which allowed them to understand and structure their content they have created over years, which provided new insights. It also provided kind of new ways to play around, kind of to play through scenarios, what would happen if we combine those things. And of course, it creates a huge opportunity if you link it back to your fan base, to your user base. And actually that happened with Daredevil, where Marvel was kind of cooperating with Netflix, and I think you will hear a couple of Netflix examples later. But I think here it's also I think a perfect example where a content creator like Marvel has used their creativity in understanding their content, understanding the opportunity and the potential of their content, and link it back to kind of a company like Netflix, which of course has a deep understanding what the user likes and how the user is interacting with content. There's also tools for that. So, for example, it's a company called Scriptbook. What you see here are different dashboards. So it's a solution, and the top in the one in the center is an analysis of the Passenger movie. But this has been done in 2015, before the movie was actually done. So it was utilizing the script and the values, for example, the rating, as well as then the value of for the movie in terms of generated revenue has been predicted in 2015, and now the prediction is a bit higher than the movies at the moment, but the movie is still in the cinema. So the accuracy is quite amazing, and that has been based on analyzing a huge set of data sets of movies in the past. And of course, this is a tool which helps you to understand how the characters, how the sentiments will impact the success, the rating of your movie. They also did kind of, to prove their concept and prove the value of their data, they also kind of did a post-analysis of I think 62 movies. The left side, you see the decision in terms of green light, so the 30 ones which have been kind of perceived as a success versus the 32 which have been predicted as being not a success. So the model as such, the analytics, from an analytical side, has predicted the same amount of movie, the same movies which will be a kind of a hit, but it also identified actually 20 out of these 32 ones before that they will not be a hit, so they shouldn't get a green light. So I think this is a good example, of course, how analytics and data can support decision making in the process before a movie is released. Of course, assuming a movie is produced, it's also about how do you reach your consumer base. And nowadays, of course, the challenge is the world has been getting more and more complicated. Users are kind of interacting with many different channels. Being on top of where you find the user and what situation you find a user is getting more and more difficult. There's different data points from reviews to, of course, the monetary side, but also, of course, you can get the sentiments out of tweets and so on. So you can get all kind of different indicators which help you to understand how your movie or how your kind of program is going. The challenge to overcome that, and that's more like, you could say, rather generic picture how you need to build kind of your infrastructure as a content distributor, as a marketer in the new world, is you need to be able to handle all different channels. You need to be there where the user is, not the other way around. So the old world is that you try to get your kind of your audience, your user to your side. I think the new model is you need to be there where the user is. And the only way to do that is you need to play very smart in terms of what you know about the user. You need to play very smart about what content you have, and you need to be able to combine that, and you need to be able to learn. So that is an ongoing loop, which means the way how you do marketing is fundamentally changing. It's not like you do a marketing calendar on the beginning of the year or as part of the planning. It's an ongoing process. And that, of course, means the way how you need to set it up, the way how people are interacting with each other is massively changing. It's more than just a bit of kind of, let's do it a bit more digital. This will not be enough to be successful in the future. Because the old model that you have the 4 Hollywood segments is not working anymore. You need to turn it around. Instead of 4 kind of 80 million segment in 4, it's exactly the other way around. It's the 80 million groups in kind of packages of 4, or even if you want to go further, going into the segment of 1. I think this is the ultimate goal of a company, and if you look into Amazon or other kind of players very successful in that area, they want to make this experience a very personal experience. And this is also, by the way, the best way how you can see how far a company is in the digital disruption. You can see it by measuring how granular they are able to address their target group. Again, data, different. We talk about the same data sources now with a different perspective. And here, example with Godzilla, so the legendary pictures. So you see here, they identified their hardcore fans. They made their hardcore fans aware of the the movie. They also, but usually kind of your fan base is quite easy to address. The most challenging thing is kind of which are the people you need to kind of convince, persuade, identify them and address them. This is more or less what they reached here. And I think with less media spend, they reach a much bigger audience when doing that exercise. But it can also go further. So IBM and 20th Century Fox has kind of put their brains together. IBM utilizing Watson, their AI engine, quite popular also in different industries, and they analyzed kind of movie trailers, and then they analyzed kind of Morgan, the movie. And what you see here at the chart, this is now done by Watson, analyzing, utilizing the emotions, the sound effects, speech, music, picture, scene, to identify the sentiments of the movie. And based on these sentiments, they identified the kind of the top 10 scenes which should be in the trailer, and also in which sequence. So, sounds all great, but I think reality is also, it's a learning engine. So you still need human supervision, human learning. And I think this is also, when talking generic about AI at this moment is a lot about training. So you need expertise. It's the combination of technology, creativity, and content which makes the difference. It's not one of the, so technology alone will not make the trick. It's the three elements which you need to combine together. And that's why I also, now for the people in the audience which are convinced about the opportunity, this is an opportunity to combine these three things. Of course, it has also kind of big benefits in terms of time to create a trailer, in terms of reach, how to reach kind of the right audience, kind of making the trailer in such a way that it also addresses the needs and the expectation of your base, which results into efficiency and of course increase the likeliness of success. Testing can also go into all kind of things, price, cover. So here an example of Netflix where they're testing, and when the one with the green arrows were the most successful one, they're constantly testing which is the best cover, which one converts the best. This is now in the movie industry. Go to Amazon. Each of you using Amazon has been part of an A/B test, even without knowing, where different prices have been tested, different positions of the logos have been tested. Amazon, for example, is doing around 30,000 tests a year in an ongoing basis, and it gets even bigger and bigger. So the marketing side, creativity side, but also let's look into the user side. And I think here is a big opportunity. The famous long tail is also, of course, very relevant here. And I think especially in the movie industry, where you have kind of such a wide variety of content, there's a huge opportunity to kind of impose and release the long tail to a wider audience. And I think you see that in different ways. Here, kind of the Netflix side, in different stages, different logins. For example, first, without being logged in, second, first time logged in, and it adapts to your preferences, to your kind of the movies you have viewed. It also changed, of course, if you change the account, and it also changed, for example, if you go to the kind of if your kid profile is activated. And it seems to work, because I think 75% of the users select a movie based on Netflix recommendations. And it's a model where you see it's a combination of millions of users, it's a combination of millions of ratings, and it's a combination of hundreds of thousands of movies. And there's different ways how this recommendation can be presented. It is a big technical exercise, so there's a lot of investment and a lot of kind of technology power into that. So this is more a picture to scare you, but that's more like how this kind of architecture looked like. The good news is, 10 years ago, this would have been kind of a huge investment. It's still a big investment, but it's very scalable. So a lot of these elements are actually open platforms. Some of them are highly scalable. You see, for example, cloud space. In the past, it was kind of a massive upfront investment into a data warehouse before you can utilize the value. Now you can grow with your kind of ability to also leverage this technology. Let's quickly jump into another industry, because also I think this is, you could say now, speaking for more like from a generic view, kind of the music industry has been through that turbine of digital transformation quite a bit. Here, Discovery Weekly, this is from Spotify, based on 75 million users, their listening behavior, they have started to kind of offering the Discovery Weekly. They generate a playlist in a fashion as some of your friends, which have a different, kind of a similar music type, would recommend you some songs to explore. So it helps you to discover things which you otherwise would not, or only with kind of with a lot of effort, be able to explore. So on the left side, you see kind of, it's the taste of profile, it's a similarity model, and that generates the list. It also makes sure that songs you already have in your, on your list are not recommended again. And as you have seen in the slide before, people actively using it, kind of more than 60% of the people kind of listening to those songs, five or more of these songs. 70% or 71% are actually adding at least one song of this list to their playlist. And again, a picture to scare you, but in a way it looks very similar to the other one, very complicated. So that's already happening now. So what brings the future? I think one thing which I think has been a challenge, and we see that every day in our work, is how you structure your content. One thing is to understand the user, but you also need to be sure that you understand your own content. And what you see here is a company called Valossa from Finland. And now the statements below are done by an algorithm. So the algorithm starts to understand the movie, and it starts to kind of tag the movie and any video content. And that's, of course, allows you to search in a total different way as a user. And that's a live service, so it's called What is my movie? So you can test it. So you can say, I want to show me a kind of movie with Brad Pitt in the bathroom. And not sure if it works, by the way, but give it a try. And this is, of course, a learning exercise. A quite young company, but it shows the potential that you can search and you can discover content in a different way, which was not possible before. This is an example from MIT, whereby by pictures and video combinations, so they analyze the whole video, but they're now able to kind of identify by one picture what segment it belongs. So, for example, this is now related to badminton. So each of the picture in this 1.0 so means the confidence level. That means they are able to identify, even with the picture, if they have kind of done the learning exercise properly, what is the content of this picture and what is the content of the movie. YouTube or Google just released a project called 8 million dataset. 8 million because it's 8 million video URLs, 1.5 million hours of video, classes and so on, to categorize content into many different categories. And the result is, and that's also something you can test, you can now, for example, search in a different way. Show me videos with dance. The nice thing here is this has been done by their research team. This is also accessible for everybody. So you can also get access to their data set and explore it by yourself, which is also something what you see very often nowadays, is that companies are opening their data set because they believe there will be more creativity, there will be more kind of competence outside, and even maybe somebody with a total different perspective coming up with new opportunities out of their data set. That's why they're opening it up. And it, of course, can go much further. So you will see not the movie now, because you just see how it is done, because you will see the movie later. But this is now where AI or data and analytics have been created a movie, the script of a movie. And as you can see, created a screenplay automatically. And now, of course, you wonder how the movie looks like, but you need to wait. It comes later. Another example looks a bit funny, but what is happening here is the algorithm is predicting the next picture. So it creates a video by pictures by utilizing kind of 2 million of unlabeled videos. So a different way how you create content. There's also other examples. A lot of this work is actually on MIT at the moment, exploring different ways how you can utilize kind of content to predict what's next. So to close my speech, of course, there's a lot of challenges ahead, and I think also this forum, I think, is a perfect platform for also kind of look into them, because I think a lot of them are related to the interaction of people, how people work. And as you can see, it's an interplay between these three elements: the human side, the creativity side there, AI and data. And also from a European perspective, I think a lot of these things are looking for platforms. It looks for a platform for growing talents and expertise. I think if you look into Europe, Europe is lacking of AI specialists, is lacking of data experts and data engineers. We talk about hundreds of thousands of kind of talents missing, which are actually preventing a lot of companies to leverage the potential. Also knowledge share, as said before, a lot of these opportunities will not be possible if you're kind of locked in your company domain, or you're locked in a governmental domain. It only will work if you're kind of driving it out of an open platform. You share knowledge, you share data, which also brings back to open data, open platforms, APIs. In a lot of these areas, it will be not possible to do it independently. Even for the big giants, they only will succeed if they're working together with others. It's still in a very early stage. Don't get kind of blended by reading about AI every day. It's very early stage. A lot of things to learn, a lot of opportunities, of course. And of course, a lot of questions about ethics. We heard some of them before. How can I trust the system? How can the system be manipulated? How kind of this serves it to the right purpose, and so on. I think that's very normal that in the situation where we are, in the kind of the maturity of this technology, and therefore let me say, my closing say is that I hope you're raising now all the hands if big data and analytics is an opportunity, because I think that's what I strongly believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dirk. So I'm happy to understand that big data is already outdated, since it's the very angle of the upcoming panel. But yes, well, we are about to tackle big data, and does it really means big audiences for us, or should we be more tailor-made focused? Big data can lead to a more engaging or a more personalized relation with our audiences. That's what we're about to see together with, of course, an amazing panel. They are about to join me on stage. Sarah Lewthwaite, Strategic Partnerships Director for Movio. Tom van Laer, Senior Lecturer, Cass Business School at City University of London. Oscar Sharp, he's a filmmaker and producer for Lewthwaite Films. And Guenaëlle Collet, European Affairs Managers at European Broadcasting Union. And you can applaud them, of course. So, since we're all gathered on stage, you can grab your mics. And, well, actually, the very first question I would have for you guys here on stage is to try to understand, how would you define data? Because there are so many ways, again, to interpret what data are, and how do we put them into context? How do we extract them? How do we exploit them? You are at every stage representing a part of this ecosystem: filmmakers, marketing guys, platforms, and distribution and broadcasters. So again, what does it mean to you? Maybe let's start with the ladies. Sarah.
That's obviously a very big question. Because big data, I think in general, even at the term big data, as Dirk mentioned, it's intimidating. People don't know what to make of it. And I think that in some respects is what's held our industry back, because where do you even begin with something so massive? But I'll let maybe the academics speak to what the data points actually are. I would say from a marketing perspective, what we're talking about is the insights. What insights can you derive from the data, and how can you actually action that insight to improve your marketing and to change customer behavior?
Because can you just remind us briefly what Movio is?
Sure. Movio is software as a service. We're a cloud-based software solution specific to cinema. We work with about 40 cinema chains globally and connect into various data sets that allow cinema marketers and ultimately film studios as well to better understand who's actually going to the cinema, where are they engaging with content, and how can you use that data to more effectively target your marketing.
And that's certainly a question we will tackle in a few seconds. Tom, from your perspective, you're closely studying data. How would you define them?
So I'm a narratologist. That's an endangered species, I think. Basically what that means is I research the functions, the structures, the causes, the effects of stories. How do stories work? Why do people tell stories? How do people consume stories? How do they change people? So for me, data is quite simply, words are data. Text is data. Most times, every time, a word has a particular meaning, has a set of meanings around it. That can help me to analyze, well, anything, basically. So words, text, that's data.
Well, actually, our data just texts to you, Oscar. We'll talk about it, and we had a little glimpse at it, a teaser with Dirk a few seconds ago. You've been experiencing a world premiere, working with AI to write a full script, but we'll actually have a glimpse at the clip afterwards. But from your perspective, again, as a filmmaker, what are data?
I'm so glad that you use the expression "what are data," because it's very rarely asked in that way. But this is just it: is that data has changed as a word, and as the narrative. I finally met a narratologist. I've been wanting to meet a narratologist for years. I talk about it all the time. My favourite writer actually is the first narratologist, Vladimir Prop. I'm sure you spend a lot of time reading about him. And these were thinkers and have been for a long time who've taken the history of narrative and broken it down and tried to work out what's going on with it so we can do it better. So this is sort of what I've been trying to do. But when it comes to data, so we begin with the word datum, which is just the single object, which, as he says, is a word. Actually, it's just any object. A bit of sand can be a datum. A person can be a datum. A 1 or a 0 can be a datum. The important thing about data, the plural, when you get all your datums together, isn't each individual datum, it's how they relate to each other. It's where you sat instead of where you sat when you're a datum, and where you sat when you're a datum. It's where, when you have a word or a letter, if you take one particular big collection of datums, how each one of them relates to all of the other ones, right? And so when Vladimir Prop or one of the other narratologists was looking at the datums of narrative, I don't know, somebody punches someone else, somebody breaks into the fairy tale realm. There we go, there's a good example. They went, oh, people keep breaking into fairy tale realms and all these stories. So now we can have a pattern where the breaking into the fairy tale realm bit usually happens somewhere near the beginning, for example. So they started working out there was a pattern where that datum, breaking into the fairy tale realm, turns up. Now, what we worked out how to do as a species by building these wonderful machines is that we got much better at finding lots and lots of datums and saying, how does this datum, when it turns up, usually relate to all of the other datums? So what can we say about the patterns of the ways that these datums all turn up in this particular kind of thing, right? Now, when we did the script for Sunspring, which you saw appear here, what's happening there is we've poured hundreds and hundreds of screenplays into one of these pieces of software, and it's looked at all of the datums, the individual letters of those screenplays, and said, in screenplays, when these letters turn up, where are they likely to be? And it figured out that they're more often than not in a word like that, in a sentence like that, in a piece of dialogue like that, in a scene like that. And at the moment, we're not good enough to do it really well, but we're getting better and better at it, just as we have at analysing stories over the years. Is that a reasonable description, do you think? Okay.
Well, that's a cliffhanger, and I have to stop you here because we are about to talk and deep dive into Sunspring and what it is all about in a few seconds. But talking about species, we do have a broadcaster on stage, Guenaëlle. Actually, again, why data are relevant to your part of the industry?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for being here today. And as you said, I represent the broadcaster side. So the European Broadcasting Union gathers 73 broadcasting organizations in 56 countries in Europe and beyond. Overall, this means we reach about 1 billion people. And what data represent for us? Well, it's very simple. Actually, it is a game changer for the public service broadcasters. Why is that so? Because for decades we've been a mass media, and now we are moving towards a mixed model. Some of our programs will remain a one-to-many broadcast model, but some others, and increasingly so, will be personalized. What does it mean for public service broadcasters? In this increasingly competitive market, we need to remain relevant. We need to remain distinctive as well. So data has actually a big impact. It is a tool, really, that we can use for the best or not, and we try to do that for the best. To change and adapt our programming, but also our production, and put wherever relevant, increase personalization of the service. And I can elaborate on that a bit further
Sure.
later on if you like.
Totally.
Just one word still now. This is the reason why we have launched a corporate initiative at the EBU, taking advantage of this network we have of public service broadcasters around Europe and beyond, which is called the Big Data Initiative, and which was launched in summer 2015.
And of course, you will tell us about in a few seconds about your return on experience of this big data initiative. But first, what we are going to try to do here on this very stage is to see how data can empower ourselves from the very creation process onto the marketing one, and the way we do engage with audiences. And of course, Tom, you're going to be the expert here, and we're going. But actually, you are about to, you will play the part if you do accept it, to just, to try to challenge us in the way that, of course, we are quite genuine about how we do better this data right now in the industry. But maybe there are some challenges here that you can help us to be aware of. So let's start with the filmmakers. And again, with you, Oscar. So we've seen during Dirk's presentation this kind of Matrix versus Black Mirror introduction to what you've been doing on this project, Sunspring. So again, it's a world premiere because you did use AI to write a full script. I think that one of your colleagues who work on the technical side of Sunspring should be in the room.
I was hoping so, but I don't actually see him. I think
Scott, if you're here, just raise your hand.
Maybe his program has crashed and he's stuck in the street, unable to move. I don't know what it is. Right now he's not.
Okay, so yeah, whenever Scott's in the room, just please raise your hand. And of course, we can have more technical questions to Scott at the very end of the panel during the Q&A.
I can probably answer some of them if he doesn't set up.
Wow, wonderful. So you did learn about innovation yourself.
We work very closely on the thing, yeah, absolutely.
And how actually you two work together to have this part of innovation blending to human creation?
Well, so it's something actually I'd been interested in a long time, but without having the programming skills. So about 15 years ago, I tried to make a play using a machine, except that my machine was a spreadsheet that was a list of lots of things that could happen in a play, and then my machine was some dice that I would roll over and over again to try and get a random list of what could happen. And then I applied some rules of the Todorovian, Propian narratology variety to this list to try and make it shaped a bit more like a conventional piece of narrative. And in a way, when I met Ross with his programming abilities, it was a means to produce something that did the same thing in a billion times more sophisticated a way. But the reason for doing this really is that, okay, so I imagine everyone in this room who's done any screenwriting has encountered, let's say, three-act structure, right? Is that something that's largely acknowledged? That we're told that if you want to make a successful film, it should have 3 acts, it should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, it should have this and that and the other. What's what's odd for a creative person about that, I've always found, is that it's an imperative, it's a requirement to you to make things be like other things in order to make them good. But that's in contradiction with the idea, as a creative person, that you want to be original, isn't it? Which is tricky, because if you're completely original, which is to say so original that you're unlike anything that's existed before, it could just be white noise. And it wouldn't even be for a particularly set amount of time. It might be for a year. White noise for a year, that's original. It's probably not a very good film, right? So
Maybe.
somewhere there exists a scale between total originality, which is just to say potentially absolute nonsense, and total sameness to other things, which is going to be boring. And working out how to fall along that line is the reason for this kind of project.
So how about we just watch together a brief clip of what Sunspring is all about, and then we'll dive into, again, your return on experience. How could you improve the process since you've been doing Sunspring and filming it? So let's watch it together.
In a future with mass unemployment, young people are forced to sell blood. It's something I can do.
You should see the boy and shut up. I was the one who was going to be 100 years old.
I saw him again. The way you were sent to me, that was a big, honest idea. I am not a bright light.
Well, I have to go to the skull. I don't know.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know anything about any of this, so...
Okay. What would happen next? Actually, what the it's complicated here, but what the amount of AI in the very brief clip we saw, and the amount of human creativity?
Well, so every word that is being spoken has been written by Benjamin, the artificial intelligence, but also a lot of the action description is also taken from the screenplay. So a lot of what they're doing is something that Benjamin has said that they ought to do. For example, when he picks up the slate, I think the action description is something like, he picks up the tablet or something like that and fights the transmission of the security particles on his face. That's what Benjamin said, and that was the way that we chose to interpret what Benjamin said. So interpretation obviously is key here. The actors are interpreting the lines with some emotionality, and the production designer is interpreting what's been described in terms of the actions with a prop that they've built, and the special effects designer is producing a special effect to represent security particles on his face. So in each of those moments, a piece of the human interpretation is happening, just as it is when we sit here and we watch it, and we try to make any sense of what it is that Benjamin is saying.
So actually, and now the new life writing with Benjamin. If you had to do it again, would you do it the very same way?
Well, so we probably will be doing it again, and Benjamin is improving gradually. But actually, for me, as we go forward with Benjamin, I've been trying to basically give up more and more of my job. I'm quite lazy, and I'd really like Benjamin to do my job for me, insofar as it's possible. So I would like Benjamin to direct the actors. I would like Benjamin to pick out the costumes. Actually, he did have some input in the costumes here.
Can you also, make coffee?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, Benjamin maybe will, but maybe I'll just make the coffee for Benjamin. I don't know if I should pour it in the machine directly. It might be a bad idea. But anyway, the point is, insofar as it's possible to give up more and more of my work to algorithms, the more I'm able to see when those algorithms seem to be getting at what I think is right, what it is that I've been doing, and therefore learn about what my work is. So, for example, I was writing a science fiction screenplay myself when we did this project, and Benjamin's training is entirely science fiction screenplays. And there was an interesting pattern that came up in Benjamin's output, which that Benjamin constantly says, I don't know what you're talking about. What's that? What's going on? All of the characters in it constantly saying things like that to each other. And I realize as I'm reading this that happens a lot in my science fiction screenplay, not in quite those phrases. But people are always asking each other in science fiction movies to explain what's happening. Because in science fiction movies, quite often, something quite confusing is happening. And we need an excuse to explain to the audience, oh, well, that's a spaceship, but it's really from in the past, and it's got aliens, but the aliens are made of clouds, or whatever it is that's happening in the science fiction. So, for me, as we move forward with Benjamin, it's always been about trying to get that model to teach us about what we've been doing, about what our patterns already are, both in order to learn to do them better and in order to learn to break them, because, as we said, that's where originality comes from.
And actually, how does Benjamin improve? Through machine learning?
So, yes, Benjamin, Ross describes it as bakes his models. It usually takes him a couple of weeks to a month, depending on the size of computer that we're running the training system on. And that is a process by which whatever data has been put in, or whatever a training corpus, as we'll refer to it, has been put in, will be analyzed by the software, and a very complicated matrix of probabilistic values will be created that shows for any given letter what letters were likely to come before it and what letters were likely to come after it, for example.
But actually, practically a question of philosophy here. I mean, a filmmaker willingly giving his power and his creativity to an AI screenwriter, Tom. What could we, and what the perspective on that? I mean, because it's just so taking at core of what we're doing here in the content industry.
I understand the anxiety about it. I wouldn't claim I'm a philosopher, by the way. That's way out of my league. In academia, we're comfortable with data. In the audiovisual industry, it's still newish. I wouldn't say it's giving away power. It was said earlier by Dirk, like big data is already outdated. Something I've also heard saying quite often, it's like, it's not the size of the data, it's what you do with it.
Sure.
So, it's about, okay, not so much what I feed into a model, it's what I want out of it. So you can think of, okay, I want to predict box office revenue, that'd be really nice. I want to predict whether people are going to be engaged. All of these things are helpful. So you can actually say, okay, so supposedly we have a couple thousand screenplays. A scenario in which we have a couple thousand screenplays. Now that's already a big data problem. One person would take a long time to get through all of them and probably get depleted halfway through, not knowing anymore what is what and what is good and what is bad. Now, if you have some sort of algorithm analysis model to shift that for you, to sample from that, to reduce that large number to a more manageable number, well, you're going to be able to make better decisions.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say it's something to be scared of. I would say it's a tool that helps to keep the power, because the final decision is not going to be a computer.
Still be human-made. Okay, so now if we do bring another part of the equation, which is audiences, because we totally understand now how AI, how data, and the use of data, and the way you do the context of those data can help and improve the creative process. If we, again, do take into account the audiences, well, guess what? Sometimes I'm an audience, sometimes I'm a gamer, sometimes I'm a news consumer. I'm a multiple thing in just one day. And again, still talking about how I'm going to consume content and numerous contents on many different places where it is available, tablets, computers, traditional television, movie theaters. So how would you cope with my journey as a consumer? And again, I'm really using the term consumer here on purpose, because it's kind of also of a clash of culture here. Audiences are, of course, at core when it comes to the content industry, but at the end of the day, we are consumers. Sarah, maybe.
Sure. I think data more than ever is extremely critical for our industry in helping to find audiences for films. I think taking a step back and looking at the communication landscape we're in, there's so much fragmentation to find an audience, yet there are increasingly number of film releases every year. I know in the UK last year, there are, I think, 600 film releases in 1 year. So you combine the amount of content with the fragmentation in finding the audience. So data, I think, has become the critical success factor in doing so. And if you're able to understand your audience and be able to target them effectively through the right channel at the right time with the right message, you're going to see better results. And I think when we talk a lot about data, often people relate it to how studios and mass films are being supported. But when in reality, I think the quickest wins for data in our industry are finding niche audiences for titles that may not be supported in the same way. How can we use it to support European film titles? How can we find audiences when a film is at the tail end of its release and maximize the box office at those stages in a film's life cycle? So I think data is absolutely critical in finding audiences today.
Yeah, and the other point you just point out, actually, the fact that big data is not necessarily massive, or referring to massive audiences. You can go tailor-made and be more hyper-personalized when you want to target a specific audience.
Yeah, we have a great example coming out of one of our clients in Scandinavia who was trying to fill auditoriums for a really specialized release. It was an event cinema release, and they went into their data set and they found about 800 customers who fit the profile. And some of you might think, oh, 800 customers, that seems like a waste of effort. But in fact, they were able to sell 622 seats to these 800 customers, which was quite a phenomenal result. When you extrapolate that across your release schedule, you're filling a lot of seats now for product that you might not have been able to before.
And you're way more effective that way.
Highly effective, and you're delivering, I think, a great experience to the customer.
Yeah.
Because I loved the stat about Netflix, about 75% of recommendations that are being used by people to choose their content on Netflix. Well, we could be doing that in the cinema industry. We could be actually driving incremental visitation with a really smart targeted recommendation for a film that might have been lost through the clutter of marketing.
And we'll definitely go more onto user experience in a few seconds. But before, I would like to have Guenaëlle's answer on this question about, again, taking the audience and taking them into the equation. How do you engage way more and more in a more efficient way with audiences through data or AI or whatever innovation big data can define?
We do that in many ways. One of these is the one that you just described, actually. So through audience measurement and analytics. We have working groups that actually work with researchers who work on how to improve the measurement of your audience using I can never pronounce it. The data you own, proprietary data, mixing it with market data, and using also third-party data, so has to have a level of granularity and a comprehensive understanding of really who your audience is, but also if you are trying to reach out to new audiences. For instance, you want to develop your sport programs and the success of those programs, and you want to adapt that to the audience, you want to meet their expectations. You can use this data to better target this audience and also to improve the content to make it more tailor-made for this audience. The same goes for younger audiences, for instance, and in that respect you can also use strategic partnerships with social media, for instance, and these partnerships can help you drive back audiences that you will find on Facebook and the like, and also use Twitter and the critics that may be given Twitter, for instance, and they will come back to your broadcast, your program, traditional program, and also your online offers, of course. So that's one way. Another way is to improve the quality of the production. And you speak about script writing. As regards the broadcasters, a key element that may be less central here, but still I think it can be replicated for documentaries and other types of productions, is the news making. Data journalism is a new skill. But I can give an example of a web series called Data Girl, for instance, that is produced by a French production company. Maybe you know about it.
Henri Poulain.
Okay, because it's been broadcast on France 4, but also on France Info TV and on YouTube at the same time. On YouTube, it reaches 200,000 people on average. And actually, it's a very short format, 4 minutes, and it describes it gives you information about one topical item. It could be the migration crisis. It could be, for instance, recently I've watched one on the lottery and how many chances do you have in the end to be the lucky winner? And I can tell you, after you've seen the infographics, you will never ever spend again your money on that. But this is done in a creative way. This has an impact on management as well. The production, behind the production, you have a team. It is made of one data journalist who uses data to find information and data mining and statistics, a new way of finding information. He works together with a designer and also with a producer, of course. And all together, they produce this 4-minute format. This has been tremendously successful, and data has also helped us analyze the success of this format, and this has helped in the decision-making process to renew the partnership and prolong the contract and make new series of the like. That's one example. Another one, and maybe if I have time, okay. You can enrich the comments you make on live events. One of the advantages of data is that it can really come to you very quickly. This is the velocity of the 4 V's that we've seen Dirk describing earlier today. And taking, for instance, a sport event, you can have an anchor commenting on it, and he can access, or she can access, very interesting information about a given sportsman, how he performed in the past, how that compares with other performances done by other people throughout the history of that kind of sport, things like that. You can add that information and integrate it in the comments live. That's another illustration of how it can work. Lastly, we also work on recommendation systems and exchange best practices among ourselves. And we are developing a recommendation system called Rexis. This is quite...
Really?
Yeah, well, yes. RTS in Switzerland has started implementing it. BR, Bayerischer Rundfunk, as well. The Spanish TV is also very much involved in it. And we use data to design and develop the right algorithms that will help you suggest to the audience what they may like to see, but in a distinctive way, in a way that fulfills the public service remit that we have to fulfill. That means, for instance, that you will instigate some discovery items into these algorithms. So it is, if you like, a positive bias. You can, you can actually...
Bias can be positive sometimes.
Yes, but you can use it to fit the editorial lines you want to follow. And lastly, it has an impact on management. So we are also working on how to make the best of data for managerial purposes. Some of our members, notably in Nordic countries, DR is a good example, for instance, have set up what they call integrated newsrooms, and they put journalists together with data scientists and technologists, and they also try to defragment the silos, the traditional departmental organization of a broadcasting organization, because in the end, everyone can contribute to the success of this data strategy. This is another workflow, if you like, that we are developing throughout this big data initiative that was launched in 2015. And given its success and the fact that broadcasters find it useful, it has been prolonged. And for the next year, we're trying to reach a more industry-led level, a more operational level, if you like.
Yeah, that's a lot of great examples on how data can empower audiences and at the same time broadcasters or any of us working in this value chain and this ecosystem. But let's bring back the audiences to your system, and Benjamin, if you may, Oscar. Would be the next step working through Benjamin on the filmmaking process, the way that you can have feedback from audiences and have Benjamin translating them into a new format or a new way of script writing again?
Well, it's interesting. When we made the film, we entered it into a competition. We actually made it for this competition, which had a panel of a jury panel, much like the Berlinale here. And what one of the jurors said about the film was the only thing that would like to watch this film would be another computer, and that did give us the idea.
Did you take it for granted?
Yes, we sort of thought that would be a nice thing to evolve. And as we've seen, there's a lot of services where computers watch films, and turning Benjamin into a viewer is a completely appropriate step, because what makes a director in the first place? I wouldn't have decided to direct films if I hadn't seen some films first. In fact, I didn't invent the idea of movies and then decide to make them. I saw a bunch of them, and then those influenced me, and I started to want to make things in a particular way. The same process takes place with audience members. They watch a bunch of stuff, probably when they're growing up, when it just turns up, it's whatever their parents show them, or it's whatever the broadcaster has analysed would be useful for them to see, as you said, that's pursues their remit. And it starts to give them taste. They start to form their tastes. I think taste is sort of one of the most useful concepts that we tend to ignore when we're talking about this stuff, or at least we cover it with a single wave of the hand and we call it sort of content discovery or recommendation or something like that. What kind of thing will you like? And actually, like is the most useful word probably to think about this. So we like a Facebook post. We say, I like this thing. I 5-star this. I like it. Now, it's interesting that the word like is both a positive emotional response to and a similarity. One thing is like another thing. And that's, I think, is appropriate. When you're saying, I like this, it's not far from saying, this is similar to other things that I have decided are to my taste. Right? So if what an algorithm is doing is it's saying, you have previously said, this is something that is similar to things that are like my taste, it's going to very naturally go, oh, well, I've seen a pattern in all these things that you click like or 5 stars on, and I'm going to give you another one, and I'm going to give you another one. But of course, we've already learned recently what the problem with this is, which is that we end up only seeing things that are like other things that we've liked before, and then we end up in this tiny little box where we're like, well, I've seen a lot of things, I've seen I'm very exposed to the world.
Yeah, but that's totally part of the discussion, and that's more political here. But the fact that we don't challenge our own opinions online anymore, but that we don't confront them to other opinions, but we just, tend to build them, and they stick to be like what you were previously, thinking about one news fact or one political fact. And I just understand that the same thing when it comes to the content industry.
Yeah, well, precisely so. This is. It was once said actually, every revolution in art is a return to naturalism. Yeah. And there's this idea that we go through these cycles where we get sort of more and more bored with what we've been doing because we get better and better at doing things the same. Yeah. Because we want to sell stuff, we want to have large audiences, we realize that doing it the same will get us audiences, so we do that more and more until the audience goes, oh my God, everything's the same. And suddenly it's really important for it to be different. So in a way, these tools might be just as useful, not for making things the same really efficiently, but for going, this is what we're supposed to make, guess what, we're going to do the opposite. And that's kind of what I'm interested in doing.
Sarah.
I actually think it's really interesting when you look at the scripts that are generally greenlit by major studios in Hollywood. They are, right now, most of them are not using data. So they're relying on the fact that something has performed at the box office, therefore I'm going to make something similar, and then something similar, which is why you see a million Marvel films, which is why you see sequel after sequel. I think where data can be helpful, because I don't think we're there yet, at least on the Hollywood side, is to find who's coming, who could come more, where the opportunity lies to create content to actually drive more audience to the cinema instead of relying on the tried and true all over and over again.
I was sitting in one of those rooms in a Hollywood studio not 5 days ago at 20th Century Fox. So, you know, I'm a conventional filmmaker too. The next project I have in that world is adapting a big book by the guy that wrote The Social Network, which is about the de-extinction of the woolly mammoth. Bunch of real scientists. Hello.
Ho ho.
Oh, this is Benjamin's.
We're
probably
having a moment
tuned in.
here.
Benjamin, it's all right. You can talk later. It's a bit of he kind of had tantrums. Anyway, the point
Rage
is
against the machines.
yeah, precisely. But so there I am talking to them about this movie that we'll make, and when you talk to a Hollywood executive, what's normal is that you will give them reasons that it's similar and reasons that it's different at the same time. So the most common thing that people are used to hearing is like, this is, I don't know, Towering Inferno in space, right? This is Train Spotting meets Dumbo, or something. And when you do that, it's precisely because
I would love to see what, you know...
Train Spotting meets Dumbo sounds amazing. It's elephants, it turns out, are really susceptible to addiction. Anyway, but the reason I talk in this way is precisely that. We already know this instinctively. We already know this because we do analytical learning systems of our own, but we do it in ways that we don't fully understand in the backs of our minds, where we go, things are like this, kinda, and we know that they need to both be different and the same. So we go, they're going to be like these two movies that exist, but they'll be different because no one's ever combined those types of films before. So I think that you're right that the executives are not necessarily using these data-driven systems, but they're actually trying to do the same thing, just in a different way.
Well, I just would say that I think the gap is that they often don't have access to the data.
Yes.
So what I would love to see is greater collaboration at all stages of the industry, from the producer and director stage, scriptwriters, through to Hollywood, and having the actual data being used on what greenlight scripts, how movies are marketed, to the cinema when it's actually released, and have that as a loop, because to me it's amazing how there is not that data sharing in place, and there's such a gap in the inside of who's actually consuming the content from all ages, stages.
You used a very interesting term. You said insight was the most important thing. And what's fascinating about insight to me is that's something that happens in a person. It's not something that happens in a machine. It sort of suggests insight. You look at the results and then you go, oh, I've figured something out. And that's where insight happens. And that's sort of a data journalist is going to do that. You know, you said they're going to look at a lot of data and go, oh, the important bit in the data is this. This is telling you that a lottery ticket is a terrible investment, something like that. So insight is what they've been doing anyway. It's been their job for years to have the insight that the reason this succeeded is these elements, not these elements, right? Which is still a possibility. But the extraordinary thing about a deep learning system is that a deep learning system is generating and accessing patterns which are, like us, essentially insights, in that they are structured pieces of pattern forming. But they're structured pieces of pattern forming that actually human beings are not capable of grasping, that we're actually not able to wrestle with the number of statistical latencies that in one single letter in the context of a 1 million letter screenplay, for example. But they're still useful to us if we can find the right way to extract them. So I agree with you. I think, but how we're going to apply it is something we're all still learning.
Well, that's the question here. I mean, how can we all together work as an industry on, you know, cross-culture, on cross-processes, and on cross-sharing data? Just a brief word before we do hand it over to the audience, actually, because we have an actual audience here, and open to a Q&A with you guys. Again, if you do have a reaction or a question to one of our panelists, just raise your hand and the hostess will provide you with a mic, I guess. Yep, they are here. And I mean, those questions can also apply to Dirk. I mean, he's still with us. So if you have another question on how we can handle data and AI and machine learning in this whole kind of industry, just the guy here for you to answer the question. Just to sum it up really briefly. So we do agree that data, AI, whatever you call it, can help us tell better stories. Because that we do at the end of the day. We tell stories, right?
May I
Yeah, sure, Tom.
add one point to that? Because it's about the definition of what's a better story. And to me, a story is in the eye of the beholder. So it is actually the audience, the consumer. I teach about digital, I study stories, and basically if I watch the trends in this direction, what I see is that fast forward, I don't want to put a number of years on it, but fast forward a large number of years, the algorithms are not going to be on the production side. The algorithms are going to be on the consumer side. And then, you know, similarity or having a recommendation just as, that's not going to be what it is. Yes, you can take the default option, or as a consumer, you can say, well, I'd like to have a movie with this and this and this in it. And then the thing is also that movies are going to be, it's not like one entity, one product. It's similar to what we saw with all the imagery that you can basically say, well, I'm going to watch title X, you're going to watch title X too, but you're going to have a different experience. Because you're going to see different scenes, maybe different characters develop, a kind of similar outcome in the end, but it will be similar to mine, but different because we have different algorithms that we use to access what we now call a singular movie. So you will get a multitude of movies within one story because the story will be adapted to the audience. It will not be the director who says, well, this is the be-all and end-all of this story.
So there's already a product called Interlude, which I'm sure you've come across, which is it's essentially an interactive YouTube video. The idea being that you can click on a certain direction and it'll take you to a different bit of the movie. It's sort of choose your own adventure of film. But one of the most interesting things that Interlude have done is they've tried to incorporate eye tracking. So where you're looking will affect where the movie goes. Now, for me, the way that I would want to make use of that is precisely as you say, if I'm watching a scene with 3 characters in it, quite often, you know, you'll watch a scene and there'll be a character that you think is really interesting and they'll leave, and it will follow the boring character that you don't care about. If you watch them go, it's going to, in my dream, you'll now see the next scene with them and the next scene with them, and whoever you're looking at, whoever you're interested in, it figures out that that's the character you like and it'll let you follow them.
Which is the future, which can apply to VR, for instance. When you're working with augmented reality or virtual reality, you can also totally think about, I mean, the way you can empower audiences that they can help you bring a different scenario and tell different story. But we'll deep dive into algorithm and, you know, the battleground on should we trust algorithms? Should they, I mean, are they effective when it comes to sharing more diverse cultural works or not in a few seconds in the second panel. Just a brief question, and again, if you do have a question, just raise your hand so that I can see you and hand it over to you. To what extent data can help us promote EU work? Because in case you just noticed, we're on the European Film Forum panel. So is it effective when it comes to, I would say, preserve, protect, and defend the EU work?
I would go back to what I said earlier, and I think absolutely it can help smaller films that may not have the big budgets for marketing behind them. I'm not saying that all European films are in that scenario, but it can certainly help some of the films that maybe haven't got the breakthrough marketing campaigns. There's what I'm really encouraged about is all of the conversations happening around this topic. And I think the need to support European film, the need to support our industry and innovating and learning from the other sectors, learning from the experts who are using data for music, for other forms of consumption, for me is really encouraging and will only help to lift the European industry. And UNIC and Celluloid Junkie actually recently published a report about the innovation in the European industry. And I would encourage you all to read it because it talks a lot about how as an industry we're getting behind European film and getting behind this sector so that we are continuing to grow and thrive, and using innovation and data is just one part of that.
Guenaëlle, on this question of fostering innovation and the way we can be more efficient into defending EU works?
Yes, I think it's a very good and very important question. The tech companies have been the first ones to take up really the potential of big data or whatever you call it. And most of them are not EU companies. So now we are at a crucial moment when we need to really tackle this potential and make the best of it. And I think it's typically, data is something that is a language that can be shared and understood throughout across borders, and where collaborative efforts are very fruitful. I can see that at small scale, but I truly believe this is the same at EU level. Now there has been a survey made by Information Week in 2014 about the main barriers to a successful use of big data in the media sector notably. And the first reason was budget constraints. The second one was the lack of a business interest. And the third one, no, not the third one, but later on came lack of management tools. It is my understanding that we are facing more or less the same situation right now at EU level, and I would only encourage collaborative R&D, and this can also be made through simply the sharing of knowledge, expertise, best practices, and also professional training when it comes to developing new skills. I think these are two ways forward that would be very useful for us.
Anyone has any question to our guests on stage? Not for the moment, okay. So I got one, believe it or not. Yeah, well, actually, will we all turn into data scientists?
Will we all turn into
data
scientists? No. Data science is an enormously difficult specialism. And in fact, Ross, my data scientist, has just been trying to call me. And I would ask him, but he's not here. I'm going to text him that question.
Sure,
and we'll find out what's going on.
But yeah, I mean, will all this amount of data coming into, the ecosystem and the way we not totally change the way we work, but actually improve the way we do tell stories, market films for audiences, engage them with audiences. How are we turning again into data scientists ourselves?
Well, you asked me earlier to challenge a bit.
Yeah.
I frankly, personally think that data science as a term is the most useless term I've ever heard.
Okay.
Well, not the most useless. There's even more useless terms.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Let's stay out of it. The point is, if you look at the two words, data and science, science means, knowledge. You try to acquire knowledge of certain things. For that, you will always use data. So any scientist is a data scientist by definition. You cannot be a scientist without using data to do it. Now, all of a sudden, you can be a scientist of data, but that in itself is kind of a loop. It's a meaningless term in that sense. You can only be, and that's what I said in the beginning, it's not the data, it's what you do with it. A data scientist will always be, to me, it's just a scientist, but a data scientist of something else. You can be a data scientist of movie making. You can be a data scientist of whatever it is, because that's how we do science. We use data for that.
So will we all be
either we have
data scientists of movie making?
Either we have always all been data scientists, or we will all become, but it's...
Okay,
it's,
I do understand that data scientist is an insult at that point, so I won't bring it... Yes, Guenaëlle.
Just adding to that,
Sure.
I think what is key is the effective collaboration between tech people and the creative people. In the end, that's a good mix, according to me.
Do you? Yes, you do have a question. Wonderful. Hi. So, and you got a mic. That's perfect.
Yes. Patrick von Sahovsky, Celluloid Junkie. Thank you to all the panelists. It's been very informative. I don't think anybody in the audience would dispute the importance of data, but could you address the ownership of data question? Because it seems like a major roadblock that there isn't enough sharing between the content creators and distributors on one hand and the platforms and cinemas on the other hand. So how do we get over that?
Sarah?
Well, I can speak to what we're doing in another territory, which maybe the EU can learn from. So in North America, cinema chains that use our platform sign data sharing agreements where we take customer data, cinema data, aggregate it by the territory, for instance, the USA, anonymize it, so all personal data is stripped out, and put it into a separate portal whereby film studios, producers, directors are able to access it and license it at low risk because there's no personal data being shared. And for us, it's a win-win because the studios are getting the behavioral data and the demographic data they're really interested in. And the cinemas are able to then leverage their data as a new asset and monetize that data as a new asset. In that case, the cinemas always own the data because it's their customer, but we're making it available for use by the industry in a way that, as the saying goes, you know, the high tide lifts all ships. So everyone hopefully wins in that scenario. I think that's a lesson that could be applied to other territories, but you're absolutely right. It's a very sensitive issue around who accesses what type of data point and who ultimately owns the consumer relationship.
Guenaëlle.
Yeah, we very often hear about first-party, second-party, and third-party data, and I think there is actually your question may be more relevant for what is called third-party data. Mm-hmm. So the first-party data is the data that you own and you know where it comes from. So it's kind of it's checked. It's you can really know where it comes from. Second-party data is the data that your partner owns and it knows where it comes from. So again, normally it should be reliable. And third-party data comes from outside, and this is where sometimes there may be difficulties in evaluating how relevant it is. Then there is another aspect, which is the privacy issue, but I understand this is not to be...
Yeah, well, actually, that's the reason why I'm less tackling this kind of question, privacy, safety of data, and even who owns data, is because what we want to do during the discussion and afterwards, I mean, those questions are totally up to you and to debate with the guests, but we just want to try to be a little bit, again, risk happier here and try to see how data, machine learning, AI, algorithm, whatever, can be tools to enable and empower us. But,
yeah.
So we
sorry, just to finish on the privacy aspects, the public service broadcasters, they are very much concerned about that, and this is not only because of ethical issues, this is primarily because of that, but also from a purely business perspective, you need to have your audience engaged in the long run. You need it to trust you, and trust is key in that regard. And this is why a number of them have developed privacy policies, and they try to be as transparent and as didactic as possible, telling the people really, here is your data. Of course, we need your data to better understand you. This is what we would like to know from you. This is the purpose for which we would like to know that for you. This is what we will do with your data. We will not give it away to anyone, and you will be able to check at any time what is being made of your data. So I think this is one key element that is also tackled at EU level right now. It's a very important element.
Oscar?
It's always actually seemed likely to me on that front that at some point somebody will legislate that if a company has data about one of its users, that it's able to draw insights from, crucially, that those insights should be available to the individual user, which is essentially a display that will say, we think that you're in this sector, you like this kind of thing, and this is the kind of thing we predict about you. And that knowledge, knowing that Google thinks that you want to buy a mattress, for example, will become essentially an encoded legal right. But in terms of ownership, what's fascinating for us, we actually have one of the best legal firms now in the world on the subject of intellectual property, tearing its hair out over who owns what Benjamin writes. Because we put other people's screenplays into Benjamin, screenplays that were created by human beings who definitely own those things in terms of intellectual property. And Benjamin has found patterns in them. Now, crucially, Benjamin is definitely not plagiarizing. This is plagiarizing has a specific definition, which is to say there are no reproduced sections of those screenplays of any kind. You will never find the same 10-word phrase in one of Benjamin's bits of output taken from one of the input corpora unless that phrase turns up in loads and loads of screenplays. Then Benjamin might repeat it. For example, when Benjamin is outputting synopses for films, Benjamin will often say, a young man in a small town, because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of film synopses have the phrase a young man in a small town in them, because Benjamin is essentially a cliche detector in that way. But it's totally fascinating and really difficult to identify who owns what Benjamin puts out, because Benjamin's produced a statistical model about what we do, and who even owns the model is tricky. So far, we think it's Ross. That's the best thing we can.
We're still waiting for Ross, actually.
Yeah, he's.
We would love to talk to that guy.
I think him and Benjamin are having a fight right now. They're having an issue. I'll find out what's happening. Hopefully, I mean, it's possible, by the way, that Ross doesn't exist and he's just a software himself. I can't possibly comment on that.
Do you see Fight Club?
It could be.
Okay.
I've definitely met him.
Do we have another question before we go to break? We don't? Okay, just a final question from my perspective so that we can all sum it up. There is a certain trend in the Silicon Valley to have an answer to every single problem. We call it solutionism. Are data a solution to every single question we have for the future of this industry?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's a yes.
I would say it comes back to my earlier point about data science.
Sure.
So I believe every question can be solved by science. If not, I wouldn't be in science. And to answer those questions, a scientist gathers data. So yes, by definition.
I see it as another tool in our arsenal that can help us all do our jobs better. And I'll just throw out one stat, which is cinema chains that use data appropriately to drive their marketing have seen a 10 to 20% lift in attendance. So for me, yeah, it's the future.
Final word with Oscar, and then Guenaëlle.
Yeah, I'm not sure if data can help solve the problem of too much data. Because
of course,
let me tell you, that's a problem now.
No, totally. I mean, the volume of it is just so massive that we still have to put it into context. Guenaëlle, final word with you.
Yeah, taking from that, data can be high value. It can also be a high waste of money, depending on what you do with that. And it's not always easy to make the right decisions. And in the end, as I said in answer to your very first question, it's just a tool, and it all depends on what you do with it. So I think we haven't seen yet all the potential of data. I'm confident there is an untapped potential still, but nevertheless, what is really important is how to use it according to your own targets and objectives.
I'm actually sorry. Ultimately, one last point,
Sure.
which is that it doesn't do the originality. We do the originality, and it can give us context for originality. But the bit when you do originality is when you go against the goddamn data.
Thank you so much for your answers and insight. Thank you so much for attending this part of the panel this morning. Thanks to Dirk, too, who was still with us and taking, again, this question about data, about how innovation can be an enabler for this content industry. And we'll be back after a 20 minutes break, and we'll tackle an illustration. It might be like a Godwin point when we bring into the discussion, but it's Netflix. So we'll talk about it a little bit later.